All right. I think 7:30, so I'm going to kick this off. Hey everyone, I'm Charlie. Just want to first off thank you all so much for being here. This is awesome. I know your time is very valuable, so thank you for being here and supporting this initiative. So I'm the founder of the Veteran ETA Roundtable, and so the idea for this really came from just kind of having conversations with different friends of mine who were looking to get into the small business acquisition space. Um, whether that be, some MBA types or private equity guys, but also, I have a buddy who's moving to Indiana and he's, buying a landscaping business that he knows through his wife. And I was like, hey man, you're that's ETA, like that, that's what you're doing. So there's just a wide range of just different conversations. And we started kind of sharing resources and realized that, though there is a lot of business support out there for veterans, there isn't really like a single source of truth or, a community for veterans in this space. And I think veterans are really well suited to succeed in this space. So decided to kind of launch this initiative in this community. And so the goal of this is really twofold. One, you're going to provide concise and succinct education on the business acquisition process, both the fundamentals and specific topics down the road. And I'm really excited about the speakers that I've lined up because they're real experts in what they're talking about. And it should be really good information. And then two, and I think this is really the secret sauce of veterans and how veterans succeed is kind of the community. Because, virtual is fine. I'm sure, it kind of sucks being virtual and I can only focus for so long, on a screen. So I think the real value add is going to be the connections and kind of the network that we're going to create here. And so you can, go grab a beer with someone in your area or hop on the phone and talk about, what you have in common and kind of help each other out along the way. And so tonight we're going to have Mark Delaney with us. He's going to present on the first topic, which is why ETA, and then there's going to be a Q&A to follow. Since we have a lot of folks on here, I'm going to just kind of moderate the discussion. So if you want to send some questions after Mark is done with his presentation, just put them in the chat and I'll moderate that. And then, following this, kind of the approach I'm going to take is I'm going to follow up with a recording. You can see there's like a little Meet Geek AI recorder. So I'm going to record it and put out, key points along with some follow-up resources to kind of reinforce what we talked about. And then leading up to the next session, I'm going to reach out again with kind of some more resources to prepare for the next session. And so the goal is, as we kind of take this lockstep approach to business acquisition and then move into more particular topics, everyone will kind of have this curriculum and kind of really succinct resource guide, because I know there's a lot out there. So I'm hoping to kind of help you to kind of make that element of it much more efficient. So and lastly, since I am a lawyer, just quick disclaimer, none of this is legal or financial advice. Okay. So yeah, like I mentioned, Mark Delaney is our guest here tonight. So Mark, a little background on Mark. Mark served in the Army as an infantry officer and civil affairs officer for 8 years. He deployed to Iraq and Syria during that time. After leaving the military, he earned his MBA from Darden School of Business at University of Virginia. Mark's I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about him. He's a recognized leader in the veteran community. He founded the Veteran Professional, which is a website and podcast offering resources for veterans pursuing higher education, entrepreneurship, and professional careers. I highly recommend you check it out. He has some incredible guests, and it's really a great podcast. And Mark is now actively seeking a business to acquire and plans to manage that for a decade or more. We were just talking about it, so I'm really excited to hear from Mark and get his take on kind of that initial, why ETA, what were his considerations, and why did he, take this leap of faith and into this journey. So without anything more, Mark, take it away.
Hey, Charlie, really appreciate you having me. It's super fun seeing a lot of names in the chat people who've I've just kind of talked to over the last couple of years. I've actually even seen Rob from Business Exits. He's a broker on some businesses that I've looked at. So it's kind of fun seeing a wide spectrum of folks here. So let me first say that I am not an expert. Okay, what I'm here to kind of do is share my experiences of, I'm about 6 months full time into my own search journey. Made a couple offers, currently under LOI for a deal myself right now. So I don't have, dozens of deals under my belt or anything, I'm here to just kind of shed some perspective, shed some mental models that I used on how I decided to either make this decision or just get myself set up to get going successfully. Okay. And then I want to touch on something that Charlie mentioned as well about the network aspect. Okay. And I'm definitely going to bring this up. You'll hear this again throughout my presentation, but some of your best resources as someone who's looking for a business to buy are other people who are looking for a business to buy, other searchers, in particular, other veteran searchers. I have a group of people that we stay in constant contact with each other. We share deals with one another. Sometimes we just meet up we'll just call each other and just vent for a little bit. Okay. And it's super helpful to have that support network. This is a perilous and very lonely journey sometimes. And having especially other veterans to reach out to is really awesome. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen, and I apologize. I've got the dual monitor set up. So if I'm looking at my slides, they're on another screen. So my eyes are averting off there. That's just what's going on. Okay. Okay. So I think first, before you take any big step into anything, you got to ask yourself, why do this? And, I was just having this conversation a couple of days ago, actually, with a buddy of mine. He was an enlisted veteran who went to Darden, who has the opportunity to potentially buy a business and was trying to think about it. And the way I phrased it to him was, this has to be the path for you if you have to be an entrepreneur. I possibly could not imagine going to work at XYZ large corporation. Okay. I went to business school and didn't recruit for a normal company a single day that I was there. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and go do something entrepreneurial. My first journey was a startup, ended up not working out. And I knew that backup was trying to go buy a business. So that's what I did. I think, this path is fraught with a lot of risk. It is challenging. It is demanding, and the people who are going to be successful on it are the ones who know that this is the path they have to go down. Okay. I think one of the great benefits of ETA compared to the topic that most people talk about on the entrepreneurial land compared to startups is that startups are also really hard in a very different way. And the nice part about buying a business is you're already buying a business. It has customers, presumably. It has revenue. It has cash flow. It has potentially middle management. It's got a lot of the things already figured out. And some people are really good at the startup side, and other people are really good at taking this and growing it. Okay. I did a lot of introspection and realized the startup wasn't going to be where I was going to be successful, and knew that I felt a lot more comfortable taking something that already had some momentum and just accelerating. That's where I felt more comfortable. Okay. And then the last bit of why I think you should think about this path is, I think when you look at the risk-adjusted return, it's about the best as you can find. Okay. And what I mean there is, yes, there's going to be a lot of upfront risk. I'm doing the self-funded search, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I'm not making any money right now, right? And that's a risk. I'm probably gonna have to sign a personally guaranteed loan. That is a risk. Okay. Those are all risks to consider. But when you consider the potential of having a great cash flowing business over, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and the wealth that you and your family can accumulate by having that type of asset, to me, that risk is worth the reward. So in general, I'm just going to touch briefly on, why small businesses. And I think, one of the things that really attracts me to small businesses in general is the proximity to the work that you're doing. A lot of my classmates from business school right now are, sitting in offices and working on PowerPoint slides about, factories in Shanghai or optimization schedules for, workers in Texas or something. And that's not where they are. What I like about small business is it puts, me as the potential business owner a lot closer to what the business is actually doing, the work that's actually getting done. And I wanted to be closer to that work. I think kind of back to my time in the military, one of the most fun periods was when I was a platoon leader, and I was able to, still be a manager, if you will, but I was also able to go shoot machine guns and jump out of airplanes and ride around with the boys. Okay. And it was still fun. And small business kind of enables you to be still touching, what the business is actually doing. Okay, so this is just kind of my framework for getting started on this path of thinking about and then getting active on buying a small business. All right. So first, I want to talk about the choose your adventure. Okay, so I have this, on the x-axis we have risk, and the y-axis we have the reward. So if you go from left to right in the screen, lowest risk, lowest reward, all the way to highest risk, highest reward. Okay, so the two pieces on here, if you're in this webinar, I'm assuming you're probably at least vaguely familiar with self-funded search and then funded search. We can get into that more later. If you have questions, I'm happy to go over it. But the other two options that I do want to bring out for people are franchising and then potentially joining as a general manager or CEO. Okay, I think franchising gets a lot of chagrin. I think people look at it the wrong way. They think that it's not, you're not a real entrepreneur if you go the franchising route. Okay, I think it'd be a really great model to take. It's kind of a great mix of buying a business, but then also starting one. Because especially when you're starting a new franchise, you're gonna have a lot. You really have to build it, and it's gonna take some time to get there. And I'll also say that franchises love veterans. They really do. Okay, in their minds, a vet is a fantastic fit, for their model. Someone who's used to working within an already given structure, who is used to getting the 60 to 70% solution, and then using their smarts and their know-how to figure out the last 30 to 40%. That's exactly the kind of entrepreneur that they're looking for. So that franchising can be a really great route to consider. And then back to the idea of potentially joining as general manager or CEO. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this area where you can find someone like myself who wants to go buy a business, but maybe they don't necessarily want to go run it. Truth be told, I want to go run a business. Okay, but other people want to go buy a business, but they don't want to run it. I was just talking to a guy the other day who is trying to buy a multi-location pest control business, but he doesn't want to run it, and he's looking for someone to run it. So then you can kind of step in at day one and be the CEO of the business, be the one really running the business. Now, you're not going to get the same financial upside, but you're also not going to have the same type of risk. You're not going to have a personal guaranteed loan. You're not going to be stuck in the business for 5, 10, 15, 20 years if you don't want to. Okay, so that can be another option to just step into the role of running a small business without nearly as much risk as the self-funded search. Okay, so before you actually start searching and deciding what you want to do, and what I have here laid out is really focused for a self-funded search. Okay, and so this is all about getting your personal house in order. So the first part is the financial piece, and thinking about, I say I'm a self-funded searcher. I like to really say that I'm a wife-funded searcher. Okay, luckily my wife's got a great job, and she's able to really pay the bills right now. Okay, I can contribute a little bit with some side hustles I got going on, but it's mostly her. All right. And then luckily I still am getting healthcare from the VA, which is super helpful right now for us. Okay, but you do need some money to cover deal fees in looking at businesses. Okay. So the stats that I have on the screen here came from a Search Investment Group. They're really the only ones who have any type of actual data out there about, in particular, self-funded searchers. But most people expect that the average deal is going to cost them about $50K. And that's between, hiring some accountants for a quality of earnings report and hiring lawyers to really kind of finalize all the paperwork for the deal. All right. The third stat you'll see there, the 75% keep dead deal expenses. Basically what that means is, you can expect they say the average searcher is going to go through 3 deals before they find one that lands. So you can expect to get under offer on a business, and then you find something out from the accountants, and it turns out the business wasn't nearly as good as it looked, and you want to pull out of it. Well, you have to pay the accountants for that money, so now that money's gone. Okay, that's just something you have to budget into this process. So the other parts about getting your personal house order, other than the finances, is I think having a really honest conversation about 2 key subjects. The first is potential for a personally guaranteed loan. Okay, that is a very real world objective risk of, like, right now I am looking at a business where I'm probably going to take a $5 million personally guaranteed loan to buy this thing. That is not an inconsequential amount of money. I don't have $5 million in the bank. If the business goes sideways, like, I'm on the hook for that. Okay. Now, the really nice part about the SBA loan is they can't necessarily come after everything. Okay. There are certain protections around, retirement accounts. And if you have a certain amount of, you have to have a certain amount of equity in your home before they can come after your home. There are some protections around your personal assets, but you don't want to be in a position where you have the bank calling your debt. Okay. So that is a very real risk to consider. The other thing I think it's really worth asking yourself is, do you want to be the one actually running the business? Are you just someone who likes the idea of running a business, who likes the idea of searching for a business? Are you really someone who is like, yep, I'm ready to sign up for weekends, early mornings, late night phone calls? And I think what we all kind of realize is that burden of command of, I am the one in charge of the ship and there's no one else I can really talk to, or that I have as a peer on the ship because I am the captain. Okay. That is what you were taking on when you were buying a business and turning it into the owner. Okay, so step 3 here. Network like a motherfucker. All right. It is one of the absolute best things you can do when looking for a small business. Okay. 2 of the absolute best sources I can recommend for you are Twitter and Search Funder. Okay. The first thing I'll say in Search Funder, if you're not using it or on it yet, it's basically like a LinkedIn for people in the search community. It costs like $70 a month, but if you post or comment one thing a month, then you get that month for free, and it adds up. So like right now, I have like a year in the bank that I don't have to pay for. I've never paid for a month, and I've been on it for years. Okay, so don't let the price scare you away. I was talking with a buddy of mine who's also searching, and we were talking about how we both learned more from Twitter in 2 months than we did in 2 years of business school. All right. Whenever I have a challenge or a problem, I have a question about something legal, something financial, something operational in a small business, the first 2 things that I do are I go to Google and I type in my question, Twitter, and I type in that question, and then I go to Search Funder and look for it. And 95% of the time, someone else has already either answered my question or asked my question, and I can find it on usually one of those 2 platforms. That is what I do all the time when looking at businesses and now doing due diligence as well. Okay. One of the absolute biggest wins I think you can do for yourself is, and the earlier the better in this process, is as you start talking to other people, whether they be other searchers, other potential investors, lawyers, accountants, whoever, put them on an email chain, and once a month give them an update on what you did. Okay. It doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be anything super in depth, but you want to let them know, hey, this is what I did this month. Here are a couple of wins that I had. Here are a couple of losses. Here's where I need some help. Okay. This is somewhere, I'll be honest, I've totally failed at. I've not been great about this, but I've done it with some other ventures that I've been involved with. And it's super helpful because you'll talk to a million people, but if you don't keep them updated, they're going to forget about you. Okay. And this is a great way to keep them top of mind, and then also use them to bring you potential leads. One of the best people, one of the best connections that I have as a self-funded searcher are traditional searchers, because they're looking at different size businesses than I am. So all the time they'll find a small business that's too small for them, and then they'll pass it along to me. Okay. So the more people you have in your circle, the more people who are thinking about, you and what you're doing, the easier it can be. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the biggest excuses that I hear from people about why they haven't started their search yet. And so when I'm talking to someone like this, they've already bought it. They've already said, this is what I want to go do. I want to go search for a business to buy. Like, I'm committed to this path. And then usually I hear one of these 3 excuses, and the one I hear 99% of the time is the first one. Okay. I gotta get my website together and my legal docs before I can go start searching. Okay. I made an offer on a business with a Gmail and no LLC. All right. I don't recommend doing that, but I did. Okay. And if I hadn't gotten steamrolled by someone who had all cash, I think I probably would have owned that business, but that's not how it works out sometimes. Okay. I could hit end on this meeting right now and have a website and an LLC stood up by the end of the day. Okay. It does not take that long. Go to Wix, go to Squarespace, spend 2 hours, go to LegalZoom, spend 30 minutes, bing, bang, boom, you're done. That's all you need to do. You don't need any fancy legal documents, especially if you're a self-funded searcher like me. The only reason I have an LLC, to be kind of totally honest, is so I kind of have a semblance of legitimacy. I'm a single person entity. The LLC, I don't have any money in it. It's not used for funding. There's going to be a new entity that's created when I actually acquire a business. So my search entity is really just kind of there for general purposes. Okay. The last thing I'll tell you about is as you start this process, greatly be prepared to pivot. You're going to go in with your initial thesis of I'm going to be looking for an HVAC company in my hometown of Kansas City, Missouri. And then you're going to start looking for HVAC companies in Kansas City, Missouri, and realize, wow, that's actually not going to work out well for me. I don't want to do that. I started talking to other HVAC owners, and it turns out it's not a business that I want to be involved in. Okay, so then you can pivot. I've probably gone through 3 or 4 major pivots, either on geography or industry or even just model of what I'm looking at. And I've been searching for about 6 months. That's probably a little bit more than usual for most people. But the point is allow yourself the space to get feedback from the market, get feedback from the experience, and go for a new strategy. And then the last bit on there is give yourself the freedom to say, you know what, this just really isn't the right path for me. I've been doing it for months now, and I need to quit. You know, my wife and I, we have our exit criteria of, you know, if we hit this point, I haven't bought a business yet. Okay, you know what? I need to go look for a regular job. All right, we know what that is. Luckily, we're not there yet, but knowing what quitting looks like is helpful, and give yourself a permission to do so if it's the right fit for you and your family. All right. Okay, so then I tried to encapsulate the biggest takeaways. I could share anything with you that I've learned from, you know, my last 6 months of searching, and, you know, make a couple offers and now, you know, being under offer on a business, right? The first bit is stay disciplined, take care of yourself, eat right, work out, do all the things you need to do to be a happy, healthy person. Okay. Next, pick up the dang phone and call people. I cannot tell you how important that is to just not rely on email, but to actually pick up the phone and call people. There was the business I'm under offer on right now. There was actually there was a unique quirk in the structure when I put in my offer, and I was kind of going a little bit back and forth on email with the broker. And I just picked up the phone and called him. We had it figured out in 5 minutes, and it was a pretty easy fix. Okay. Everyone in this age wants to live in their digital foxhole of email and Slack and everything. When you can actually start getting people on the phone, having real conversations with them, good things can happen for you. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, keep your stakeholders updated. Avoid the next shiny ball. I've been totally guilty of this myself. Of, oh, here's a new business, here's a new industry, franchise I'm gonna look at, whatever, and then losing time and focus on trying to, you know, chase something down when, you know, really just should have niched down and focused on one thing. Okay. Talk to a lot of people, be very deliberate with your time. Okay. And then lastly, and this is so important, and I don't understate this, is just be a good person. It really does matter. This is an extremely personal interaction. Okay. This is an extremely personal thing that is happening for a business owner who maybe has had this business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Like, this is their baby. These employees are their family. This is a huge deal for them. The more humility and integrity you can bring to the process and just be a good, honest person to everybody involved, the better off it will be for you. I promise you. Okay. And then the last bit here is just my kind of simple framework for, do I submit an offer on a business or not? So this is assuming I've found a business and I think that I want to submit an offer on it. The first question I got to ask is, can I afford it? You know, does the cash flow in the business support the debt coverage? And then got to ask, is it bankable? There are certain industries or certain businesses or certain business models that the bank just kind of doesn't lend on. An example there would be anything cannabis related. They typically don't touch, or for an SBA loan in general, they have to have at least 3 years of tax returns. So if it's like 2-year-old business, you're probably not going to use an SBA loan on it. Probably get debt from somewhere else. But I think it's also super important that you spoke to the seller and actually got along with them. That you thought it, and you looked at this business and say, okay, good. There's some type of match with my skills, my personality, the business buyer fit. And I think the last bit to remember here is, at the end of the day, the end game is not to buy a business. The end game is to run a great business for a really long time and generate wealth for you, your investors, and your employees. Okay. That's the game here. Okay. I think a lot of people can get caught in the search, like the hype around looking for a small business, but that is just but a small step in the process of then taking the business and running for a great time, and doing good things with it for yourself, your family, community, and everybody else involved. All right. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing because that's the last set of slides that I got, and then really at this point, just kind of open it up for Q&A. I'm happy to talk about anything, and I fully realize there may be some terms that I threw in here. I'm sure we have a pretty wide spectrum of folks, wherever you are in your process of trying to learn about this. So don't feel like any question is a stupid question. I'm happy to answer anything for you. So yeah, please share.
All right. That was awesome, Mark. Thanks so much. All right. So we got a question from Greg. How did you go about selecting the industry or type of business you wanted to acquire? And do you believe that veterans have certain advantages in specific sectors?
Yeah, sure. So the typical rule of thumb, if you are doing a self-funded search, is there are three sides of a triangle. Okay. You have geography, industry, and size. Basically, it's like pick 2 of them. Okay. So for me, I first was looking in New Orleans. My wife's from New Orleans, and that's kind of where we want to settle down. So when I've had a geographically constrained search, I was looking for businesses doing 750 to $1.5 million in EBITDA in New Orleans. And then, so those are both pretty big filters to place on businesses. So then I didn't care about industry as much, because I said, you know what, like if you're a business that fits these two checks for me, then I'm willing to bend on industry. And just about everyone that I've talked to who's been successful in the search world has said that's kind of the way, the best way to go. What I will say with, where veterans may have certain advantages, a lot of people are diving into home service businesses right now. So plumbing, HVAC, that kind of stuff. And it tends to be very operationally heavy. And so I think that's an area veterans can really do well. And I think it's also a place where, a veteran could probably get along really well with who I'm kind of thinking of as like the average small business, landscaping HVAC owner. Okay. So that's a place. And then, so I kind of pivoted my search about a couple months ago, really just to look at government contracting businesses. So, I think that's another great area for veterans to lean into. Excuse me, you can qualify for the government set aside programs, and then also if you find something that's potentially applicable to what you did in the military, then I mean, hey, that's a great translation of ownership right there.
Awesome. I got a quick question. You kind of discussed how you started out in the startup space. I just wanted to maybe if you could elaborate on kind of what do you think kind of differentiates that space versus what you're doing right now, and how should we think about whether we want to kind of go in either direction?
Yeah. So the first I'll say is with a startup, you have complete and total creativity. Okay. You have to decide how to do everything. All right. And some people love that. They love creating everything from scratch. And when I say everything, I mean, it's not just like, the logo and whatever the product is, but it's also, all the SOPs for the business, the HR policies, the terms and conditions for the website, everything. Some people really like building all that. I discovered that I don't really like building all that. Okay. I don't really have a obsessive personality, and I think you kind of need an obsessive personality to be really good at a startup. I wanted to find something where they've kind of figured all that out, and then I would still have room to maneuver and wiggle as a new business owner. And so that's why then, I wanted to go for finding something that was already existing and then applying like my own entrepreneurial mindset to it to try and grow it.
Awesome. Okay, Ivan, thanks for the question. He says, what was your average time to evaluate a CIM, any financials available, and then decide to pursue LOI or not? How do you speed this up through your search?
Yeah, good question. So I was talking with another veteran searcher, a guy I went to iBullock with actually, over 10 years ago. And oh yeah, I see you. JP, actually see your question. I'm just going to drop it in the chat because I can just link it directly from Twitter. That's just way easier. Okay. So sorry, Ivan, back to your question. And the searcher was telling me his key metric was he shot to do an LOI a week. Okay. Me personally, I wasn't comfortable, and I'm not comfortable doing that. That seems like I'm probably going to have a lot of offers out there on businesses that I don't necessarily like. And then also, and this happened to me actually when I came under LOI on this one, where I kind of had two different businesses come to me on the same day, literally the same 24-hour period. They're both ready. They're like, hey, we're ready to go forward with you. Okay. And what I didn't want to have happen was, I had too many peas spread out there, and I've got to like piss off too many people telling them no. People can feel free to critique that all day, but I was a little uncomfortable with that type of rate. So my general workflow, if you will, would be look at a sim. The sim usually has most of the financials that you're going to get until you get under LOI on a deal. Okay. I definitely want to have talked to the business owner for sure. I'm not going to submit an LOI without having talked to the owner. Okay. But once I've looked at the sim, once I've talked to the business owner, once I've modeled it out and see that, okay, yeah, it's, I think this is a fair price, if they've listed the price or not. And if that price can meet with the debt coverage and the cash flow of the business. So there's enough cash flow to cover the debt to buy the business. And then I've slept on it for usually at least 1 to 2 days of just thinking, do I want to run this business? Like, do I actually see myself wanting to run this thing? If I've kind of checked all of those blocks and there's not any major red flags, I think it's going to stop it from being financed by a bank, then submit an offer.
Awesome. And Mark, can you just explain a CIM real quick for anyone that might not know?
Yeah, so the CIM, it's usually called the CIM or SIM. It's confidential information memorandum. You might also see CBR, which is confidential business review out there. So basically, so a very typical workflow would be you're on BizBuySell looking for a business. You contact a broker and say, hey, I want to learn more about this business. They'll send you an NDA. You'll sign the NDA, and then you'll get the SIM. Okay. So the SIM is basically the marketing material for the business. So they're going to be talking about what the actual business is, like the actual name of the business, maybe who are the employees. You'll get some snapshots of the financials. You'll learn. It's just kind of where you learn a lot more about the business. I don't want to say everything because that won't really come until you get under offer and can like really lift up the hood and look underneath the car. So right now you're kind of seeing the car on the lot, getting to walk around, maybe take it for not quite a test drive, we'll say yet, but you can at least like open up the doors and look inside. But when you get under offer, you're actually allowed to like take the car, drive around the lot a little bit, have a mechanic check it out and everything. When you have the SIM, you're really just kind of looking at it, as it's sitting on the dealer right now. Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Question from Matt. How did you go about searching and selecting investors? Did you pre-select or find SBA lenders before you had a deal for a loan application?
Okay. So you're talking about investors and lenders. So I'll say with the investors, there are a lot of people out there, and again, I'll go back to Twitter and Search Funder who are interested in investing, and in particular, people love investing in veterans. So one of my first podcasts was with a guy by the name of John Hubbard. If you listen to podcasts at all, he actually was just on another one of the big ETA podcasts called Acquiring Minds today. So John's got a great story. He was an enlisted grunt in the Army, got out, he did some construction, then he was working as a cop. And then one of his old Army buddies was like, "Hey man, did you ever think like this whole buying a business thing?" He was like, "Dude, that's crazy." And then he goes on a Search Funder, posts on there and says, "Hey, I'm a vet who wants to buy a business." And he said the next day he had like 30 emails from investors who were like, "Cool, I'd love to potentially invest in you." Okay. Um, finding investors is not as hard as you might think. The way I thought about, who I want my investors to be, typically speaking, my ideal set would probably be 3 to 6 investors with, maybe 2 to 3 of those investors being like real value add people who maybe have like industry experience or own like a similar small business. And then the other ones, if those 2 to 3 can't cover the full investment, then the other 2 to 3 would be folks who really are just going to like write me a check and be a silent partner. Okay. And just kind of not get in my hair and pay them back, and we'll be happy all together. Okay. But there's the key thing to remember with investors is you are getting into a 5-7 year plus relationship, and there's money involved, so that's a very, very serious thing. The easiest way I'll say it is like, take someone's money if they're the kind of person you can go and grab a beer with and like actually enjoy hanging out with, really. Okay, and as far as the lenders, so I actually worked with a loan broker. So basically the function a loan broker plays is they take your deal and go shop it around to different lenders to find the right lender. They don't cost you anything up front. Their fee actually gets paid by the bank, and it usually will get tacked on by the bank at the end of the deal. But that's what I use to find lenders. It's definitely good to have a relationship with a couple of lenders. Live Oak is the biggest one out there, and they really like veterans, and they hold office hours. So Live Oak is great to just have a relationship with, where you can have a relationship with, where when you start looking at deals, you can put them in front of them, and they actually have the bandwidth of people to take a look at them and give you some feedback.
Awesome. Okay, from Miles, thanks for the question, guys. How did you make the decision between traditional search versus self-funded? Are you concerned about not having advisors/investors to offer support and guidance that you would have through a traditional search? And how do you mitigate that risk?
So I'll touch on the second question there about not having advisors and investors, and I think that's it's a bit of a myth on 2 different fronts there. Okay, the first is that I absolutely have investors. They haven't invested in me yet, but they've expressed the interest of, when you find the right deal, we want to invest in you, that I stay in contact with all the time. Okay, and they're the kind of people that I can reach out to and run some ideas by them, put a business in front of them, and say, "What do you think?" before I'm even asking them for money. So even as a self-funded searcher, you can absolutely have those relationships with advisors and investors, even if they haven't actually committed capital to you yet. Okay. So then back to the question of traditional versus self-funded. Really what it kind of came down to for me personally was I wanted to be able to dictate where I want to go live. One of the downsides, I think, of the traditional search is you have to have a very wide geography you're looking in. Traditionally, they've said you have to do a nationwide search. In the last couple of years, that's changed a little bit. You can probably get away doing a regional search, meaning like I want to search just in the Southeast or the Northeast or the Mountain West or whatever. But in my instance, for my wife and I, the best life we're going to live is living with our friends and family in New Orleans. And I wasn't going to be able to get a traditional search fund just focused on New Orleans. Okay, that just wasn't going to work, and so that didn't work for me. Okay, and then the second piece was, listen, like I wanted more ownership. Okay, When you're a traditional searcher, you walk in on day one with 8% ownership. And after a couple of years, maybe you'll be up to 16 with time vesting, and you're not really going to get your last 8% until you exit the business. And so that means, while you're running the business, you're topped out at about 16%. And I wanted more. Okay. I wanted to be able to have more ownership. And then the other kind of part of that was the traditional search fund model is predominantly focused on buying a business and selling it in 5 to 7 years. And I didn't want to just I feel like everyone just is like buying and rinsing and repeating and recycling like the same set of businesses. I wanted to be able to buy a business and hold on to it for 10, 15, 20 years and not have to sell in order to return capital back to my investors. So I didn't want to do traditional search primarily for those reasons. Okay.
Great. And one thing I was could you just maybe what's a life in the day of Mark Delaney like? I'm sure a lot of us are used to kind of the structure of both the military and kind of, our job. So how do you kind of approach a day? And I'm sure that's hard to balance as well.
Yeah, great question. So I wake up, and kind of going back to my earlier points, like I work out. Okay, I get a workout in every day. Come back, make sure I make a good breakfast, hang out with my wife for a little bit, walk the dogs, take care of all that kind of life stuff. Okay. I like to spend the first hour of every day doing something kind of creative just to get my mind going. So sometimes I'm writing a thread on Twitter. Maybe I'm writing something for the veteran professional, doing that, but that kind of helps get my juices flowing. And then, I usually have a couple of phone calls a day with either potential investors, maybe other searchers. Right now I'm talking with the bank a lot. Even though I'm under offer on a business, I'm still looking at other businesses to buy. This is the one that I'm hoping closes, but I want to keep the pipeline open. When I wasn't under offer, I mean, it was really a lot of, scrubbing up. I only did brokered searches. Okay. So I didn't try and do any type of, cold outreach to business owners. So I was constantly scraping all the different websites and reaching out to business brokers, letting them know who I was. So it was a lot of emailing, a lot of looking at websites, a lot of looking at garbage sims, and then passing on those businesses. You're going to spend a lot of time. You're going to kiss a lot of frogs before you find the prince. You look at a lot of piles of shit before you find the right dime. Okay.
Great. So you don't do cold plunges or anything like that, Mark?
I actually do love cold plunges. I like to make fun of them on Twitter, but I actually do like cold plunges. I just don't have a cold plunge pool in my house.
Awesome. All right. So I think we're right about at that time. So if you, really appreciate Mark being here, and thanks everyone so much for attending. I'm going to post a quick survey in the chat. If everyone could it's one question and take you 5 seconds. Just kind of trying to gauge where everyone's at in this process so that we can, continue delivering good speakers and things that, are helpful for everyone in this group. Like I said, I'm going to be following up on Friday with the recording, key points, additional resources, and then I'm getting a Slack channel up as well so we can kind of continue firing off different resources and kind of continue to grow this community. And then in 3 weeks, we have Chandler Reed coming. He's going to break down how to go about the actual search process. Mark really set us up well to kind of dive into these specific topics of search and ETA in a kind of more direct and more succinct way. So with that, thank you all so much for coming. Thanks again, Mark, and looking forward to our next session. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.